Hello and good evening, good afternoon to everyone joining us online and here, our fantastic audience on site of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Transfer, the Startup Center of the Technical University of Dortmund. A warm welcome to the very first Transatlantic CEO Dialogue, Startups and Entrepreneurs Edition. We invited CEOs and startups and experts from the US and Germany's Ruhr area to come together for a hybrid panel discussion and networking session. My name is Sina Ramin Sadignadi and I have the pleasure to talk you through the next roughly 60 minutes. To all of you at home, on the screens, tuning in online, make sure to stick around until the end of the session where we move over to a Zoom call so you have the opportunity to connect to the virtually connected speakers in a separate Zoom call later on. And the Zoom link will be shared in the YouTube chat. Today we want to address the big questions of what it's like to found and lead a startup in New York versus here in the Ruhr area and in Dortmund specifically, and what are the secret ingredients to successfully build up a business, and most importantly, what can we learn from each other on a transatlantic level. We have an incredible program ahead of us, but before we start, please allow me a couple of words on the history and mission of our institution, of our Startup Center here in Dortmund. The Center for Entrepreneurship and Transfer, the CET, is the Startup Center of the TU Dortmund University. Our mission is to enable students, researchers, scientists, and staff to transform science into meaningful and sustainable business models and showcase pathways towards our successful career as an entrepreneur. Therefore, the local government of North Rhine-Westphalia awarded us the title of Excellent Startup Center in 2019. We are now proud to be among the 6 excellent startup centers in North Rhine-Westphalia who received an overall funding of 150 million euros until 2024 to further deepen and intensify our activities. We are located here in Dortmund, in the heart of one of Europe's biggest technology centers, in fact, with more than 300 high-tech companies, just a footstep away from the TU Dortmund University's campus. So overall, a perfect environment to come up with new technologies and innovation. On our roughly 2,000 square meters, we provide the infrastructure like a co-working space just behind you here, and a data and maker space, as well as a broad variety of educational and advisory services, everything packed under one roof here in Dortmund. But let's now also hear a few words from our great partners from University Alliance Ruhr and Initiativkreis Ruhr, who co-organized this event. Please welcome on stage Communications Officer at UA Ruhr, Long Do Hoang. Welcome. Round of applause here. And Britta Dombrove from Initiativkreis Ruhr. Welcome on stage, please. So, Britta, maybe first to you. What does the Initiativkreis Ruhr do, and why is the Ruhr area actually so attractive especially for startups?
Thank you, Sina. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, the Initiativkreis Ruhr is one of the strongest economy alliances that we have in Germany. For over 30 years now, we are working in the fields of education, culture, and also economy. And when it comes to economy, we have a special focus on young founders because we strongly believe that they will have an immense impact on the future of our economy here. It's a very good question to ask why the Ruhr area is interesting for founders, because that gives me the opportunity to get a little advertisement block right here. So, yeah, because I'm really convinced that we are a great area for startups for several reasons. First, of course, because of all the institutions of higher education that we have here. We have like 300 1,000 students around in the area. That means we have programmer, we have accountants, we have designer, we have almost everything. So if you need somebody to co-found, or if you need an expert in something, you will surely find him or her among these bright minds that we have here. Second, we have a very intense industrial area here. Let's say DAX corporations and MDAX corporations, and they're very interesting in working together with startups. Then we have plenty of customers. We are like on the Ruhr Area, we're like 10 million people here. So let's say we will also have your customer from tomorrow. And also the costs of living here are not as high as in many other places in Germany. So there are many, many good reasons. And also, of course, there are alliances like us and others who support these kind of people who have good ideas and who want to change something in our economy. Bam.
Well, you see a lot to talk about. So Ruhr Area, the Ruhrpott, as we say, is the spot to be, no matter what you are, founder, startup, or company. Thank you very much, Britta. And now to you, Long. You represent the University Alliance Ruhr. First question, what is the University Alliance Ruhr? And I know, as a matter of fact, that you do have a New York liaison office in New York City. Maybe you can also elaborate a little bit about your activities over there in the New York office.
Yes, thank you, Sina. That is a really good question. What do we do, actually? No, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, as you just said, I represent the New York liaison office of the University Alliance Ruhr, which is an alliance between the TU Dortmund University, the Ruhr University Bochum, and the University of Duisburg-Essen, which are the three largest educational institutions of the Ruhr area. As she just mentioned, is like an amazing academic hub and also an epicenter for innovation right now. You know, like we're an area that is really thriving. And as the University Alliance Ruhr, we see ourselves as a bridge between the Ruhr area and North America, which means we represent all the research, all the innovation, and all the business ideas that come from this Ruhr area and promote them in North America with the hopes to building bridges between educational institutions, but also maybe innovational corporations, as you know, this event just represents the CEO dialogue between like Transatlantic.
Thank you so much for these insights. Well, if you want to talk more and deepen the conversation, you have the opportunity here on site to approach those two guys. Thank you very much for now. And we are now moving over to our panel discussion and introduce our panelists. So, big round of applause, since this is a hybrid event. Make some noise. Thank you very much. So now, let's start with our panel discussion. By the way, feel free to also ask questions in the online chat via YouTube. We will have now later in the Q&A session the opportunity to also have a quick Q&A session and read out loud the questions you ask in the chat. Now moving over to the panelists. First, we move to our online, virtually present panelists. Our first panelist holds a PhD in psychology. She was head of an independent research group on cultural ontogeny at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig and received the Sofia Kowalewski Award of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Despite her academic achievements, she's also founder of two startups with the beautiful names Swiftly and A is for Banana. We are very excited to know why it's worthwhile to start your own business in addition of pursuing a purely academic career. Please welcome, virtually from New York City, Dr. Trisha Scola. Hi, Trisha, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you so much for being here. Moving to our second guest, also from New York. Many startups and smaller businesses do their first steps in domestic markets. But expanding business activities to foreign markets opens up new opportunities and growth potentials, while at the same time comes with certain challenges like a new business culture or other market entry barriers. If there's one person you know who knows how German startups perform on the other side of the Atlantic, then it's our next panelists. Also tuning in from New York, downtown Manhattan, please welcome with me Mr. Dietmar Rieck from the German-American Chambers of Commerce in New York City.
Hello zusammen.
Good afternoon, Dietmar.
Yes.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now to our guests here on stage in the community space. We're so excited to have now one of the top-notch Dortmund startups, Dortmund logistics startups, on board of today's discussion. Imagine a world where you can track, analyze, and optimize manual processes of human beings. That might sound scary at first sight, but apparently does come in quite handy for many industrial purposes. We're talking about the motion mining technology. But let's hear on that later on. What it's like to found successfully build up a startup here in Dortmund. Very delighted to welcome here on stage former TU Dortmund University student and CEO and co-founder of the Motion Miners, Mr. Sascha Feldhorst. Welcome. Have a seat.
Hi.
So, number 4 in our list. He studied physics, mathematics, and English studies at University Wuppertal and Bethel College in Kansas. He obtained a PhD in solid-state physics at Laval University in Quebec and has worked many years as a consultant at Boston Consulting Group. Today, he's CEO at Atikani Consulting and responsible for the fields energy and sustainability. Welcome, Mr. Dr. Carsten Gerhardt. Welcome here on stage. So, and now, last but not least, today's moderator. Having lived and worked many years in Silicon Valley, co-founder of the German Accelerator, and by coincidence, a good fellow and friend of Dietmar Rieck, having cooperated with the German-American Chamber of Commerce during his time in New York. Today, he's in charge of the TU Capital, TU Dortmund's first startup investment arm. So to sum up, yet another truly transatlantic expert when it comes to comparing startups here and startup cultures here and on the other side of the Atlantic. Please give a hand for Dirk Kangieser. Okay, I think everything is said. Without further ado, I hand it over to you, Dirk.
Thank you very much for the great introduction. 60 minutes. It's a well-known format in the United States, so let's go to business. Dietmar, it's a pleasure to see you again. And I can tell you one secret. If you made it in New York as a German startup, as a German corporate, you will be invited to a wonderful asparagus dinner, which the GACC does. Dietmar, I hope I don't tell about any secrets there. But I like to start with you, Dietmar. You were the creator with your team of a program which is now a couple of years old, STEP, right? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about the role of GACC in general, but also specifically of the role and experience you had with STEP in New York. Please.
Thank you very much, Dirk, and great seeing you, after a little while, right, in Dortmund, and really appreciate it. Yes, we have, we are the German-American Chamber of Commerce here. Let me say 2 words about us, what we do. We are not for profit. That's kind of important, and we have been founded. That's usually not important, but in that case it is in March 1947. Basically, I say as a startup, because at that time of history, it wasn't the flavor of the month, I would say, that you would create a business organization across the Atlantic. And we take that very seriously, and also 75 years are coming up next year. Now, all we do is basically, as a not-for-profit, basically really is to be a facilitator for business economics across the Atlantics in both directions. And as a not-for-profit, it's basically a unique position that we can help startups and companies from both sides. We can get in contact with counterparts, which might be more difficult if you would do it on your own. Now, STEP, thank you for that. The STEP, which stands for Startup and Entrepreneurship, and of course, it's the STEP also. We have created actually in December 2014. And the idea at the time was clearly that the New York startup system at that time was basically exploding. And now I think it's solidly number 2, however you measure it as an ecosystem within the United States. And actually, I looked some data up worldwide now. We saw that, and we also saw, there are others maybe not at the same level at the time. That has changed quite a bit also. But our idea was, let's have German startups come to the United States, do basically 3 parts in the program. The program, one is seminaristic. What are the differences in the United States? How should you go about your business and so forth? One part is best practices, where we bring people together with other startups, where we bring people together with successful and maybe not so successful. You can learn from that also coming to the United States. And the third part basically is one-on-one meetings or a pitch night where you can get the idea one-on-one. Right now, actually, we have a startup group here, which is in cooperation with the DWIH, or the German Center for Research and Innovation, and the DAAD. Since your university, I'm sure it's the first one we do with them. We will do it again, and I do a little bit more advertisement. The next group is actually coming from Nordrhein-Westfalen, also virtually. That will be in December 6th for the whole week. For the program, you can see it we are very transparent on that. There's a website, stepusa.io. It's basically reconstructed as we speak, but it gives you a good view of what we do, what the program parts are. But I'm very happy. We have now done the whole thing 36 times since December 2014, and had about 470 companies here virtually and physically. Hopefully we go back physically next year, and in total about 640 participants. So a very big group of people came through here, and we try to keep in contact with them. There are some super success stories about it too. But again, our offer is, we want to be this facilitator, bring you to the market, connect you with people, and then listen, it's up to the entrepreneurs to make the best out of it. And I'm sure we talk a little bit later, what have you seen and how things are, when is it maybe a little bit more successful than others. But I leave it at that for an opening statement. Thank you.
Dietmar, thank you so much indeed. And Trisha, I just by coincidence found here a flyer, Women Entrepreneurship in Science. It misses your email on it, but I'm sure we can add it. That's truly what you are, right? And tell us a little bit about your background, your relationship to Germany. We already heard Sina said in his remarks that you founded a startup called Swiefly. I would say it, if I remember correctly, it could be also Zweifly, right? Which has an interesting anecdote potentially behind this. Tell us a little bit about your specific background and why you challenged yourself from academia to become an entrepreneur.
Okay, well, it's great to be here. I landed in Germany straight after graduate school I was a research group leader at the Max Planck Institute for Cultural Ontogeny. I had a very successful research career there, and then went on to win the Sofia Kovalevsky Prize of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, which afforded me the opportunity to do more research on my background is early infant development and neuroscience. So I ran another research group at the Max Planck for Cognitive Neuroscience together with the University of Leipzig. I pretty much landed in Germany by accident. At the time when I was doing my PhD, a professor became a director at the Max Planck Institute. So this sort of inspired, I think as, researchers, we're interested in we find a problem and we're looking at solutions, right? And essentially, as an entrepreneur, you're doing the same thing, but you're trying to get research out of the laboratory and into living rooms or into sort of real world problems. So that's sort of what led me into doing entrepreneurship, continuing to see problems, but wanting to see, solutions that could be applied to these problems. So the first one that came about was A is for banana. And that is focused on my infancy research and a problem that we see of children sort of losing their creativity as soon as they start school. So if you ask 5-year-olds, what's A for? 5-year-olds from around the world will tell you, who are English speaking, or, A is for apple, all right? And you see this, across cultures. And so the thought of A is for banana, it's a research base and a brand to kind of keep kids and families engaged and interacting and learning together and getting research out into the real world. Zwiftly is solving the problem. One, of getting students connections earlier in their careers and getting them sort of on the fast track to global success. My life changed completely when I landed in Germany, but as I mentioned, it happened a little bit by accident. I didn't even know what the Max Planck Institute was when I was in graduate school, right? Now it's a little embarrassing, of course, to say that and to also know about these like foundations that are so sort of instrumental in fostering successful research, like the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. And so the thought with Zwiftly is to kill two birds with one stone, zwei Fliegen mit einer Klappe schlagen, solve a problem for the student who needs the connection, the global connections, especially at smaller startup companies, and solves a problem for the startup company, which may not have the manpower to support students and to put, to sort of give the students a meaningful learning objectives, early on, and to really help them make the most of their opportunities, because many startup companies don't have the human resources departments, right? And so Zwiftly is sort of the liaison and gets students involved early and sort of understands the needs of the student as well as the company. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Tricia. We come back and I have some more specific question later on, but let's turn now to our guest here in Dortmund. And I'd like to continue with the next startup here, please. And a warm welcome to you here. The interesting thing is Motion Miners is a truly Dortmund startup. Tell us a bit about Motion Miners and also please, let me add one question immediately. Finding an initial beachhead market, as we want to say always, is of course for every startup of most importance. Did you find it here in Dortmund and the surrounding?
Okay, I will try to answer both questions. Great to be here, and greetings to New York from Dortmund. Let me start with the easy part of the question. What is our history here? Because we are really a truly Dortmund-based startup, because the idea was born here at, I would say, right between the TU Dortmund University and the Fraunhofer Institute for Material Flow and Logistics. And there are three I would say, former researchers. So there's also a connection to New York. Three former researchers had the idea to use their research in the real world. And the best vehicle to do this was to found a company. And as we had everything we needed to found this company here in Dortmund, we just stayed here, close to our alma mater, which is the TU Dortmund University. And this maybe also answers a little bit the second part of the question. If we found our first market here, yes, at least the access to this market. It's a global market because the field of logistics, of course, is global, but we had very good access to this network and to this market with help of especially the Fraunhofer Institute and the TU Dortmund University, who were both very active in the field of logistics.
Thank you. Carsten, a warm welcome as well. Atikani, one of the larger consulting groups globally, known, at least the way I understand it, also from doing the deep tech stuff. So you guys are not only strategic consultants, but also go deeper on the executional side. Tell us a bit what that means for startup. And I also read with curiosity that you specifically have also looked and are continues to look at the aspect of sustainability, which is, of course, for many startup, a theme which they are considering as a topic for their startup activities. Tell us a bit about Atikani.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dirk, and thank you very much for having me. Just for the records, I'm not the CEO of Kani. Alex Liu, our managing partner in Chicago, he would object to that. However, I think I got invited here because I'm a member of the Initiativkreis Ruhr that usually is composed out of CEOs. But since we do not have a CEO in Germany, I, as one of the German partners, am
you
in
act
that.
Like one.
As you said, Kani is trying to strike a balance between doing strategic advice on the one hand and implementation work. And from our heritage, we are very deep in the supply chain. So consequently, we also developed skills in the past years, especially in the area of AI. We are also investing in that area. So we have a whole branch doing startup investments, further developing that. Yes, as I said, to get the strategies basically on the ground. And I, in particular, I'm working in the area of sustainability. That is very dear to my heart since I discovered the first photovoltaic cell in my Cosmos experimental kit like 40 years ago. But besides my work for Kani in sustainability, I think I'm also kind of a founder and a startup because I initiated something which we call Circular Valley. And we would like to make this larger Rhine-Ruhr region. And not only talking about the Ruhr region, but really saying Rhine-Ruhr and including Rheinisches Revier and Niederrhein, Münsterland, Ostwestfalen, Lippe, Südwestfalen, making that into a place where you had to, if you want to do something in circular economy. Because we have this hotspot in Silicon Valley where everybody is going who wants to do digital and platform economy. And I've been there many, many times with clients just trying to understand what's happening in that ecosystem. Yeah, doing all the zoo visits that German companies usually do. And every time I ask myself, what is it that we actually can do in Germany? Mm-hmm. And I think we have this great heritage in industry. We have this superb scientific landscape all around here. Nowhere in the world will you find as many universities and excellent science institutions. So that combination of industry on the one hand and scientific expertise is so unique to this region, besides it being cosmopolitan, being the place of the first and second industrial revolution. So it's actually the best place to come if you want to work in the area of circular economy. And we started it this year. Only yesterday, we got our second cohort of international startups to Wuppertal, where we have the first accelerator. And so I'm super fascinated by the fact that we have, despite COVID, people from Ecuador, Brazil, Uganda, India, China, working on the meta topic of circularity, regardless of what they do. If they do electronics recycling or textile or construction material, it's this meta topic of how do we end waste ultimately.
Thank you. Great. Really, I didn't know, and that is a fascinating concept which you execute now, and that it already has bear fruit with so many international startups. Congratulations. As you said, it's a Rhine-Ruhr region, so don't bring them only to Wuppertal, bring them also to the other, and we have open doors. Dietmar, the STEP program, you have seen, as said, hundreds now of companies who wanted to explore the US market. From your collective experience, why do startups go to the US market? And do they do it at the right time? Too late? Too early?
Okay, Dirk, yes, you're pointing in a very good direction here already. And timing quite often is quite important. That's absolutely true. Now, companies, they have different motives, I have to say. You know, some of the companies we see, they just use the opportunity to see, you know, what is in that market. Is it such a great market? Is it, what would it take to go to the United States? That's part of the program too, to basically be pretty clear. It's not a small step, it's rather a big step if you really go abroad and set up a company and try to be, you know, successful here as well. So there are different motives, but for quite a majority, it's really that they have a program which is going well in their home market. And typically the best scenario is it is a product or a service that has or potentially has and global reach. I think that is very important. What we have always seen, whenever companies, and this everybody knows that here, but whenever companies have a clearly defined problem and have a solution for the problem they are solving, that's a very, very good start to be on your home market or come abroad. And then there are examples where you have, you know, examples where it's a regional, a great product. I give you one example, not sure to what extent Turbovax, for example, has been known outside of New York City. When we started vaccinating people, it was a complete, I don't want to be too negative, but kind of a quagmire how to get an appointment. You know, go to doctors. You could go to many different places. So one guy comes along and writes a program and says, I can combine all these programs, and whenever an opening is there for a vaccination, and he consolidated, I think, 600 places. Something popped up on his screen, or you got an email by Twitter. A fantastic idea, great problem at the time, fantastic idea. He didn't monetize it, unfortunately. Fortunately for us, I should say. But this would be something on a regional basis, and then a lot what we see in climate crisis, and we see a lot of startups there. You know, how you change or how you organize your HVAC, for example. That is very, very similar in Germany as it is in the United States. And if you have a great opportunity there, it's good. And then you mentioned the time, Dirk. Yes, if it's too early, it's probably, you know, it becomes a little bit difficult to get the right people here. Quite a few people also come because of the financing. I'm happy that you are involved in financing now in Germany. It's fantastic. I think we can talk a lot about the financing. And of course, everybody thinks about finance in New York. We could talk more about it if you would like to. That should not be the prime reason, to be honest, for various reasons. And depending on where the market is, we have seen companies which really tackled the market exactly when their product was needed. But that's a difficult one too, and some, you know, are too late. We also had cases when people came here with a great product, a great idea, and found out, oh, there are 3-4 others already are working on the same thing. Can be good if you cooperate, can also be kind of frustrating, but these kind of things happen. So I gave you a long answer to a precise question. I hope I covered some of the interest you had in it.
Motion miners. We talked already about the beachhead market. What's your next step? You said it's a global market, right? You raised right now your first round of capital. Congratulations. I don't know whether it's public, so I apologize because you just told me, but now it's public. So you have this good problem to solve. Now you have money to expand, and now you are pushed to expand. Where's the journey going?
Yeah, I would say after 3.5. So to clear this up, it's published already a couple of days. So it's okay to tell the world live that we finished our first seed round. So we were 3.5 years bootstrapped and grew the company from 3 founders to over 30 people. And now we have the money to go the next step, which will be not, I would say, opening up multiple countries at the same time, but we will focus more on our product development, because as a bootstrap company, you are very, I would say, dependent on revenues, and we had a lot of project business in our company. So the next step will be to focus on our product development, product customers, to expand here in Europe at first, We already carried out motion mining project in over 14 countries. So we have some internationalization anyways. Our, I would say, farthest customer is in Malaysia currently, but a German company. And I think this is a good way for us to go international with help of customers we had here locally in the European market, and then expand with these customers to foreign markets. Because even with the money we raised now, it wouldn't be enough to conquer the whole world.
I mean, in many ways, the answer probably lies also that you are there where your market is right now, right? So, and even better, you can expand with your German customers globally.
Yeah.
So this is a very good problem to solve. Trisha, your startups, they have a home market, but they have a global market as well. How do you focus and how do you find your beachhead market for your startups?
Oh, that's a great question. I try to focus locally as much as possible and then grow, from there, especially with the A is for Banana brand. But with Zwiftly, of course, I'm using all of my international contacts, and sort of that business works in both directions, right? So whether you're a student abroad, whether they're advanced high school student or college student who's interested in working with a company in the United States, or you're a student in the United States looking for companies abroad. So I would say that the strategy is, similar regardless, but as I'm starting, because I am working on many projects at the same time, mostly focus on the US market going abroad. So.
One of the things we also wanted to highlight today are some intercultural differences, if at all, in the startup world, because sometimes I believe that startups indeed unite the world in the way they need to execute, and they indeed execute. But you having been on both sides of the pond, have you seen specific cultural differences, how startups are culturally determined, executed, or do you see that is really similar?
It is a great question. I am, of course, less familiar with the sort of German startup scene, but I can only imagine that it would be a little bit different. Just given my background of, sort of starting a laboratory in Germany, I think would be, you can think of that as like sort of similar to a startup company. I think I would imagine that in the US, people, think, I have an idea, I'm starting a company. They do it right away. The German attitude is generally maybe, make sure this is a good enough idea, perhaps being a little bit, putting more research into it or more time into it. I think, again, it's hard to know, but that the scene is probably a bit more open in the United States. Perhaps we have more failure as a result. Okay, I'm not sure about those statistics, German startups versus US, but I might imagine that that's a difference. So in thinking about the event for today, I can't help but think about like the difference when you're just simply like crossing a street in Germany, right? And if you cross the street in Germany and the light is red, what happens? People yell at you, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, what? And and at least in New York, it's just the opposite. I mean, you're trying to cross the street and you think you have the right of way. Cars are still coming at you. Like the rules, if you will, are different. I think that Germany is more of like a rule-based society. And so, once you're sure about your idea, then you go for it. And I did notice this when I've taught entrepreneurship for German master's students. And I think compared to the US students, they're a bit more like, I'm not sure about this idea, and maybe it's already been done and things, you know, and I think the US attitude is, oh, here's an idea without, and this is, you know, I need a patent tomorrow, but they never actually research the idea to see, oh, it already has been done, and how can this be more innovative, and things like this. So I hope that a bit answers, you know, the question.
Thank you, you did indeed. And I think one of the first things I had to learn here again, that there seems to be still a mentality in Germany that a startup, when it wants to get Gründerförderung, that it has to write a business plan of things it definitely doesn't know yet, right? But it's pushed into a system where...
Dirk, if I can...
Go ahead.
No, if I can say maybe 2 words about that from my observation, you know, on the general side, we have the same values, you know, the democracy and legal systems. The cultural differences are there. And more traditional companies, it's their cultural differences and how you do business, and they're mostly stemming from the legal side, product liability, personnel side, and so forth and so forth. That is not as pronounced with startups in my observation. But there is one big difference I always think to myself, and that is, if you have, you know, basically at the same thing, an American startup entrepreneur would shoot higher. Germany is, if you do one thing, shoot high with your endeavor, with what you try to do. That is a distinct difference I have seen over years now. And, you know, trees don't grow into the sky, but it's good to have a good self-esteem and basically portray that and bring that out. There's probably the one difference, but otherwise it's, you know, assimilating more and more as, you know, these things go.
Carsten.
Perhaps may add to that. So my impression is that American startups are more or less pushed into the money. So they are given money, and as we just heard, there is always the mentality behind it, we'll conquer the world. So the market is always the world. And here in Germany, we are more growing it organically. And as you said, we need to come up with a business plan, and we need to apply for 50K, where elsewhere you will just get that without asking, more or less. Yeah, so I think that is that's a major difference, just this push of money and buying market, which we wouldn't do in Germany.
Can we be so much more efficient, or do we have continued with a problem and continuously underfund our companies from the get-go?
I'm not sure if we are underfunded or if others are overfunded. Yeah, so I think it's okay what we are doing, but unfortunately, I think there is business models in other parts of the world which attract the money that are not worth a penny. I mean, honestly, why would you want to make Delivery Hero a DAX company? People driving around with bicycles, delivering pizza, is that a fair valuation of 30 billion? So not picking on that particular one, but I sometimes have the impression, I wonder why money is flowing into different channels in that regard.
Let me challenge you on that one for a second, because I mean, with your interest in circular economy and supply chain traceability is a global market by definition. Mm-hmm. So you have a $20 million startup versus a €3 million startup. Can we really overcome this through efficiency and capital better sourcing?
I would say no. I doubt it. Yeah, that difference. If you are in that range of 5 or 10, that you get more funded, you cannot overcome that. No.
But I think we all agree. The good news is that money becomes more global, right? And also American investors, big pots of money are traveling around. And to you, do you guys have plans to make it really big, or let me ask you, define your entrepreneurial success for us.
I need to think about it, because I think it is not only one picture I would draw. I would say entrepreneurial success can lie in founding a small company which is profitable in the end. It can be a huge company which is sold in the end. I think the most exciting part is the journey to this point. So to face the challenges you have as an entrepreneur, to learn, to solve, to learn more, to find money, to find partners. I think it's, for me, this picture is more moving from the entrepreneur I was when I founded my first company. Motion Awareness is my first company, to the entrepreneur I will be in 5 years. I think this is something, at least I learned from the past. It's hard to stay focused on one goal if you're in such an dynamic network and market as we are. We need to accommodate, and we need to be ready to do this. And I think this, I'm not a friend of one picture. I want to be the next Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, because I think also other founders with different approaches have a really cool journey to tell about.
I absolutely. Trisha, when you, as a female entrepreneur, which we all know we need more, and I think we slowly getting more even in Germany, was it harder for you, or was it sometimes even easier for you?
I think that it's a little bit hard to say. I think generally speaking, it is harder, would be harder as a female, especially if you have children, I think. But I don't personally think it was more difficult for me, but I do think I do not have kids, so I think that is a little bit why I haven't faced some of the challenges that other females perhaps would have. I mean, interesting. I study babies, right? So I guess a little bit, you cheat the system. I knew how hard it was. You can't necessarily. It's not going to be easy. You might be able to have everything, but I guess what I'm saying is you really can't have everything. You can have the baby and the family and the business, but you won't have your sleep. Something has got to give, right? At some point. So. But I think that is the case, for both genders. That being said, we still see, there must be something to these statistics, and women are definitely paid less than men. So I could argue, and I guess I will argue that if you're paid less than a male, you can bootstrap if you're bootstrapping your business by yourself. That's less money that you can put into your own business, or less help that you can get, and yet in terms of caring for your home or all of these things, or just simply hiring somebody to do things. So in that sense, in terms of the wage gap, I would argue that we know that it's real, and that obviously creates some difficulties, but I guess any good entrepreneur will, find a way around challenges. That's what you do as an entrepreneur. If it's not challenging and everyone's doing it, then you don't have a business, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I like to come back to what Motion Miners said about that they like to grow international with their customers. Dietmar, the GACC has not only the STEP program, most importantly, you represent and service German industry in the US market. Do you see also that German startups have a strong relationship or can use German medium-sized companies, German industry as a help to enter the US market?
Yes, thank you for that question, and it's an excellent question. To make it short, I think we see that more and more, as a matter of fact, that you can tell me, but what I see a little bit, there's a lot more interest from the so-called hidden champion and other companies, particularly in your area, you know, that the family offices and so forth are very much supporting now their regional startups, but also the startups when they come abroad or when they come to the United States. And from our membership, these kind of companies, there is clearly a strong interest, and this is why we have them and try to combine them when we do the pitch nights and when we do, as you mentioned, there's asparagus dinner, and actually there's usually an event in November this year, unfortunately not because of COVID, where we try to connect them. And I think this would be very, very important, and going forward it's even more important, both for financing reasons, but even more so for partnership reasons. And whatever we can do there, and we try to do a lot there, and whoever has more ideas how to get that together and make it work is welcome. But for a short answer, yes, more and more, and hopefully there will be a lot more of these connections.
Maybe let me add one point here, because I think here we can connect two dots. Trisha said there are different mentalities in these two countries, and with traveling with a German company, we travel to multiple countries with German companies, also opens up the opportunity to use this culture difference. Because, for instance, when we carried out a project in the UK or in Malaysia, it's a totally different setup, and we can spend much more time on the details of our data analytics compared to all the legal stuff which we need to handle in Germany, GDPR and other things, which are, I would say, clarified sideways just while the project is running. And in Germany, this can be a major deal breaker up to the point where everything is signed. So if we use this opportunity that German companies pick German startups and take them to the whole world, we could also get rid of these, I would say, German characteristic that we like to think everything through very thoroughly and write everything down on paper and sign it off in the end. At least this is, from our experience, one major advantage of this scenario.
Very good, very interesting. Thank you for that connection. Carsten, Atikani, with your programs you have also set up for startups. Let me also, first of all, ask again, why does Atikani work with startups? They don't have money, right? They have deep pockets to pay your valued fees, are usually not there yet. So what's the objective for a group like Atikani?
We think it's important to start to create ecosystems. So we cannot simply only work for the blue chip companies, because the world is simply developing into a different direction. That's at least how I perceive it, and many of my partner colleagues. So we need to bring together the various silos of corporates, of politics, of civil society, and of startups, because the challenges that we are facing, no one single group alone can solve. And maybe it's a privileged role of a consultant who is not in one of the various silos, but who can swiftly move between them to engage with different ones. And that is why we work with startups, work with corporates, try to reach out to science, to a lesser degree to politics, but I hope that will also be developed. Maybe it's an orchestration, mediation role that we can take.
You use this wonderful word of an ecosystem. You can control, you can manage, you can create.
Dirk, for the people online, I think you should, the microphone needs to be a bit closer. We have very...
Oh, thank you. Is it better now?
Better, much
Wonderful.
Better, yes.
I have two microphones, but maybe not the right one.
That's perfect.
Thank you. The ecosystem, which you mentioned, when you, in discussions with your global partners, is there a different ecosystem evolving in a country like Germany through when you talk to your US colleagues, that the ideas of an ecosystem is different, or are there similarities?
I think there is a similarity in the understanding that we need to develop ecosystems, and that we need to move into novel models of thinking, maybe that a sharing economy is something desirable. But obviously there is also differences. Like, for example, if you would argue from a German perspective, and I had a very interesting discussion with a colleague a couple of years ago, we would say, hey, we need to develop solutions which can be exported and applied elsewhere, like wind and solar, and that is actually what we did in Germany. And other colleagues from the Midwest would say, okay, if they pay me, I support them, otherwise no. So that is a different mindset. I think in Germany, we feel more responsibility, and that is also why sustainability in particular is further developed here and has been originating in Germany and in Europe as a whole. And maybe that is why in the EU we have a European Green Deal and are leading in that regard. So those differences which you can spot continent by continent, obviously to some extent are also resembled in a global company like Kani.
Dietmar, in your discussions with the German corporates and their initiatives and their, I was fascinated when I learned how many German headquarters and US headquarters are around New York. We always talk about New York City, but we forget New Jersey and this amazing belt we have there. When you discuss, by the way, which is, if I may say so, from my experience, because I lived in Silicon Valley, and when we created the German Accelerator also in New York, the question always came up with, and Dietmar and I had fierce, wonderful discussion, New York versus Silicon Valley. We make it short, there is no easy answer for that. Well, the easy answer is probably it's a 3-hour time difference and a much longer flight. You go to New York if you want for a weekend. You do not go for a weekend to Silicon Valley. Right? So communication is different, so think about that if you expand, certainly. But Dietmar, to my question. Talking to the German corporates which are in the belt, sustainability, has this also something which they moved forward and can take companies alongside specifically with that offering to the US market?
Well, that's very specific for sustainability and climate change. And of course, this is when it comes on a wider spectrum to ESG and so forth, on everybody's mind. I mean, we just, I can say that, I'm sure I can. We just had a board meeting 3 days ago, or last Thursday it was actually, and we had 2 things we discussed in detail, actually 3. One was inflation, the other one was supply chain and what we see there. But the third one, which took most of the time, was clearly ESG and sustainability and what can be done, how things can be done. It is clearly on everybody's mind here and then on our member companies, and we will try to do more there. A lot of our programs, by the way, besides the startups, are really geared toward energy. And if I do one other advertisement, if you have good programs for energy efficiency, New York City has its own law. If you have something which helps the offshore wind, that is a market that is exploding basically in front of the northeast of the United States with plans which are really second to none, as usually it is. And we just did another one for smart grids and so forth. So sustainability, the doors are wide open throughout the Northeast area, and in particular for New York, both on the government and local side, but also on the corporate side. There's no doubt about it. And whoever can bring a solution is more than welcome. I can say that to that. Maybe one word to the ecosystems. Yes, we discussed that. I think New York and Boston or others and Silicon Valley, they have their specific industries, but the depth of the ecosystem is still also important when it comes to depth of talent, for example, who you can hire, who you see every now and then, in these events and get you forward. That doesn't mean that you need to have a certain size, definitely not. But I think it is important to be really focused on some things. And then, now everything is virtual, which probably is a big advantage in that respect, that you can basically tie into anything which is going on at NYU here or at Stanford or wherever it might be.
Thank you, Dietmar. Trisha, behind ESG, behind sustainability, there's a common denominator in many aspects which are simply data. When you started your company and you think about expanding In Europe, which many people, me included, see as a strength, that we have certain data regulations, data rules. Is that for you in your business an important aspect? How do you deal with the data you collect, because they are sensitive data, right? And is this something where you see the European strategies and executions, how we handle data, as an asset or a liability?
Oh my, that's a very difficult question. I really see both sides of this, right? I mean, that the data protections in Europe are, so much stronger as somebody I've little nieces and nephews who are on the computer constantly, so I think a lot about the impact of every time you're pressing these accepting cookies and things. They're complicated issues, right? In terms of freedoms of the entrepreneur and what you're sort of agreeing to, and being told by government what you should or shouldn't be allowed to do. For what I'm doing at the moment, in terms of my businesses, not so relevant. But it has come up recently in terms of like infancy research. You want to record a baby online in the United States versus doing the study in Europe, and you just say, oh my, forget this. It's just very complicated. And you do need, obviously, need an
It is indeed a very complicated. Sorry, Tricia, apologies. I was reminded on our time span, but it is indeed, as you highlighted, a very important topic. I just want to have two short remarks also on the topic. First from you, Sven, on are the data aspects relevant to do? Compliance with data handling, is this something you take special care of inside your company? And what are you learning so far?
Yes, very important topic for us, because we measure the movements and the work, task, activities of humans in their daily business. So, of course, this is very important to gather as less person-related data as possible. And from my point of view, this is also globally an important question. And this could be one strength of Europe, to not only bring our data solution, but also our values in terms of this data solution to the global market.
Carsten, with a broader view you see many startups on this topic. What's your take on this? Is this an advantage for German startups?
The ability to handle data.
And being compliant early and have compliant as a kind of a natural ingredient which they like to live by heritage.
Compliance might be a disadvantage, because I mean, it's always good to comply with the rules, but if you are not getting rewarded for it because it's not seen, it might even be a disadvantage. So many act like just don't comply and not be caught seems to be the best strategy for some. Yeah, not that I agree with this, but
that's a very American answer, right? in that sense, well. Dietmar, a pleasure to have seen you again, and Tricia, greetings to New York. I hand over back to the panel, and I appreciate also both of you to tolerate my questions here. I hand back to Sina. My job is done. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you very much, Dirk. So we're a little bit running late, but anyhow, since this is a hybrid networking session, of course, we would also like to open the panel for a couple of questions from the audience here on site as well to the stage. Well, you have a question? Then please come on here on stage.
No mask.
Here on stage, no mask. We all tested. And
yes, I am. Hi. So after listening to your very interesting conversation. I'm wondering whether there's this, what's the main issue about, sorry? Oh, I'm just gonna show my face. Hi. All right, so what's the main difference between European startups getting money and American startups? Is it more of a mindset thing, like let's shoot for the moon and see who claims to own the moon later? With compliance being, trying to focus on the things that are not relevant to the core business model in the beginning, to plan them out and be sure that we are going to succeed? Or is it also an issue of maybe marketing with, the Ubers, the SpaceX, the Ribbons of this world, all these companies from the US that are basically making a lot of marketing, guerrilla marketing, trying to build hype even when there is no hype, or it seems like there's hype, but there's really none. And could it be also a mix of both, like that on the one hand, startups here may focus on things that are not relevant to the core business, but at the same time, they're not doing enough marketing to build or generate basically a buzz and seem to be bigger than they are right now. I'm not sure what to do with the microphone.
Long question.
Yeah, that was after listening to this very interesting panel, and I'm not sure if I could bring it on one point.
Yeah, maybe I can share one experience, because we recently raised money. Here in Germany, I at least have the feeling that it's harder to sell ideas. And I think with visions and ideas which at least try to reach the moon, you will have much harder in Germany to raise enough money, because especially the large shots need a huge amount of money. And you need a huge amount of money before it's crystal clear if the market is really there. So if you really can reach for the moon, if you're really aiming at the moon, and all these questions are, from my feeling, very relevant in Germany. And I guess with the right attitude and the right people, you could, from my impression at least, because I have also friends in Silicon Valley, they always tell me, okay, if you have the network, the reputation, and the vision, it's, I would say, easier to raise this amount of money you would need for the moon.
So it's kind of like people don't know you, and if you do enough like marketing, they feel like they may know your business and what you're doing?
I think it's also, of course, a marketing thing, because you have to sell your idea and yourself as a team. Yeah, but this, if you do the right marketing and have the right answers for the question which come up, because I guess the US investors won't just throw around with their money, they also want to invest in reasonable companies. But I think if you have the right package, this marketing topic could solve this money raising problem for you. And I guess in Germany this can be more tricky.
Awesome. I would agree on that, and maybe a couple of notes. Do you hear me actually? When it comes to financing, I know that Dirk has a lot of idea about that too. The one thing, there was a very interesting article yesterday from Bloomberg about a convertible note JP Morgan did and Tesla. And, and then there was about when Elon Musk said on Twitter, I may take it private. They then said, this is an announcement. They had to reprice they did reprice the convertible note, and it was in the amount of $1.25 billion. And I was thinking to myself, I probably would not, and this instrument probably is not prevalent in Germany. That's one thing. It's not only the size, it's also the instruments which are there, and we have discussed that quite some time, when sometimes I tell, we have here, pension plans which are defined contribution plans, and sometimes I say, well, I know some people who have basically borrowed against their pension plan to support their daughter or their niece or nephew with a startup, and that's when I usually when it's a German, it's like, wow, really, how does this work, and so forth. So the point I'm making is, it's not necessarily just the amount of money or so forth, but it's also the instruments and the breadth which is available for funding good ideas. And I think we should maybe talk more about it. And the fact that we had a wonderful super startup, in my opinion, is my private opinion, which is BioNTech, and CureVac as well, as a matter of fact too, but both came to the US for their, I don't think it was an initial public offering, but for their listing for the stock. You know, that probably a little bit of thought, but I don't want to be too negative against or too negative in that things, but these are just facts we should basically look at and think, you know, what can be done on a transatlantic basis to make capital available. And the one point, maybe at last point, Dirk, you mentioned that too, you know, is it too much or too little? I think when a founder and entrepreneurs are constantly thinking about where is my next round coming from and so forth, that is basically a lot of time lost where they should concentrate on their product and service actually. So a little bit more sometimes is a good thing.
I think what you see in the business, in the larger business in the US is also resembled in the startups. I mean, they had the housing crisis, they caused the financial crisis, they had a Moody's and Standard & Poor's that was rating any rubbish as AAA, and German banks would unfortunately buy it. But it's simply excellent marketing. Yeah? You can sell trash, and if you find somebody to take it off somewhere else, then obviously you are the winner in that game, because in the end all costs get socialized.
Fantastic, awesome. I see there's a lot of potential to further deepen the conversation. And the good thing is that we have the opportunity to do that here live on stage and in our fantastic community space with food, drinks, and so on and so forth. For online spectators, audience, you have now the opportunity to move on from YouTube to our Zoom call and join Dietmarik in New York and Trisha in New York to further go into the conversation and ask questions. They will be ready. Feel free to join the Zoom call. It will be displayed here in the YouTube stream shortly in a few moments. I think this is the moment for me, for us, on behalf of OA Ruhr and the Initiativkreis Ruhr, to say a big thank you to our fantastic panelists. Nice to have you here. Thank you again, Dirk Kangieser, and of course, a big round of applause again to our dear speakers from New York City. So I always wanted to say, leave a like and subscribe our channel, of course. And well, the buffet is open. Feel free to now approach our speakers, and thank you very much, and goodbye.
Hello.